Remember, there are many different kinds of clay bodies. Clays are considered compatible if they can be fired to the same temperature in the kiln and have the same permanency and durability afterwards. These are the compatible stoneware clay bodies that we tend to have in class at all times. The warm brown stone is the number 510. 540i is the black stoneware. 620 brown is very similar to the 510, but it has grog in it. And grog is an interference. It's actually clay as well, but it's mixed into the regular clay body to provide more strength and durability. It's very good for outdoors. And number 910 is the porcelain that you're probably familiar with from your 3 of a kind project. This is what each of the clays look like. Brown, off-white for porcelain, and this luxurious black. They're all very creamy at this point and easily mixed. You didn't see any 620 in that shot because the 620 is the heavily grogged clay from which we made each of our jigs. Yeah, I do realize that I make it sound like every ceramics project begins with cling wrap. This project is no different. Put some cling wrap over top of the jig. This is the essential separation between the clay and the jig itself. If it weren't for the cling wrap, everything would stick. I'm going to begin by taking some brown stone and working it into the details of the carved pattern on the flat part of the jig. This is the negative relief that we're pushing clay into, and this clay will result in positive relief on the tile. As I build this up, I'm working quickly. I'm not worried about the precious quality or the smoothness, the consistency on the back. I'm going to roll this flat after I fill this space completely with clay. The profile of each jig is such that there's a gap of about 1 centimeter down to the beginning of the negative relief. That's going to be the thickness of my tile. It'll include the relief, but the essential thickness is that centimeter that lies below the frame on the edges of the tile itself. Once that space is filled with clay that I've pushed in with my thumb and my forefinger, more saran wrap goes on top. Yay for saran wrap. This is a little brayer, but you can press the clay down with anything that you like. And I'm applying some pressure to the top side of the clay as it sits in the jig. That separation again between the brayer, the roller, and the clay itself is being met by the cling wrap. Okay? A little bit of rolling, working the clay into the details. The whole thing is upside down now. I'll pull this out, pull the cling wrap off of the top, and there is the first tile. The stuff that squirted out the side when it was upside down, I'll trim that off with a sharp knife. Trimming, remember that clay can be sharp if it dries with a sharp edge. So after it's been flipped out of here, with your knife, just carefully separate the clay that's squished out the top from the tile that you want. You can always clean up the edges again with a sponge, but anything that you can take care of right now is helpful to you. I have some firm boards in class that I will place my tile on and allow it to dry. This is our brown stoneware tile, and we can clean it up if we want to. The nice part about working quickly is you get these little surface lines in it, and I'll show you how great they can be when we mix 2 clay bodies together. This jig contains the Hebrew letters for the word life. You can see it's a mirror image, and I'm going to try and mix 2 clays together to make a black background with these white letters. I'll show you how that works. For this tile, I'm going to press some porcelain into just the letters. All right? So I'm going to work these into the low relief for each of those characters, those Hebrew characters for the word life. I'll work them in this way. Now I can refine this as much or as little as I want. And what's essential is that I get well into the letters themselves. What it looks like from behind doesn't make any difference. It doesn't matter because now I'm going to take some black clay and work right over that white porcelain. Remember, compatible clays. The black stoneware goes right over the porcelain. So we'll work on it this way. I realize the line might not be exact, but I think that could help build some real interesting texture and play between the two colors. Okay, just about ready to cover this up again with saran wrap. And I can use the same saran wrap, recycle that saran wrap, and take my brayer to it and roll right over. Cling wrap, brayer, same technique. I'm blending the colors beneath together. Compressing the clay and ensuring that there are no air pockets by pushing down with some considerable weight. No brayer at home? Well, the palm of your hand seems to do a pretty good job too. Try it. Feels good. When I flip this over, I can see that I have something relatively accidental, but definitely white letters against a black background. As I know that this is going to be part of a larger mosaic, I can play with the edges, tighten them up just with a piece of wood, a ruler, anything that's straight, because if I want them to fit together later, then I want them all to have fairly regular sides. Here's an example of a two-color black and white tile after it's been dried. Here's a jig with letters. The letters are necessarily reversed. Shoot for the moon. I'll try two colors on this jig and see what we get. For this tile, I'm going to take some black clay and roll out a long coil. For this tile, I'll try a different approach, and I'll work slightly more precisely, but not too precisely because I do have to work quickly. I want you to be watching this video in about 40 minutes from now. The pressure is incredible. What I want to do here is just put some clay in the letters themselves, and I'm only approximating. I'm not being terribly fussy. I suppose you could be. You could work with great detail and meticulous care when you're doing this. But time is of the essence right now, so we're not going to worry about that today. Okay, the letters in the jig say shoot for the moon. I've approximated those letters with black clay. Now I'm going to press some porcelain over top. If I want, for example, to be playful, I can add things directly at this point because I don't know what they're going to look like when they come through. So let me put a circle there. Maybe it'll look like the moon, but I don't know. I'll put it over here, and maybe I'll make a quick crescent and add that too. Again, we'll add some porcelain directly over top of the black clay. See what we get. It's going to be very exciting. Slowly building up the porcelain over top of the black. Time to roll this one out. Time to flip this one over and see what we have. Well, we have something. It's not perfect, but you know what I could do? I can clean it up and refine the edges of the letters. I know that underneath the black, there's going to be white. And if I cut through, I might be able to expose some of that porcelain as it comes through. Yeah, this one's not my favorite, but with some refinement, I think I can clean a lot of the letters up. And by cutting into the edges, I can sharpen up the text. We'll set this one aside and see how we do on the final tile. We're going to return to just the 510, just the brownstone. And I'm going to ask you to think about this. What happens if we don't fill the whole space? What happens if we leave gaps in the composition and we allow for negative space to work its way onto the tile? It's an unpredictable way to work, but you might end up with something you really like. We're going to vary the size of the pebbles of clay that we lay into the jig itself, and I'm going to allow for deliberate spacing between each of the blobs. If I think that cracks and lines in my tile lend character, then I'm going to see what happens if I deliberately plan for that. I'm making sure that there is clay touching each of the corners and also other parts of the clay so that each piece of clay has a neighbor that it's connected to. As I apply pressure, I allow for the clays to be blended together, but I know there's going to be spaces in between. This is a very experimental and unpredictable way to work, but it's very liberating in some ways too. It's a lot of fun. Let's flip it over and see what we have. This tile definitely looks more rustic, and it might be my favorite of all the tiles we've made today. It has rough edges, it looks aged, it looks like an antique tile. The cracking, I think, is only surface cracking. We'll see how well it stays together as it dries, but it looks like something from the ancient world, perhaps Babylonia. When the tile is air dried, I'll take some clean water and I'll rub the edges to remove the sharpness that comes from sitting in the jig. I don't want to apply so much water that I change the shape or the integrity of that edge. I want it to remain straight, but I do want to reduce the sharpness. Planned for, two color clay tiles can make really interesting mural pieces. And here's an example. Black and white porcelain and black stoneware. We have black stoneware and white porcelain. We have accidental blending. We have half and half tiles. There's a lot that you can do with this very expressive project, and bringing it together in a mural is an excellent way to publish your work and to be seen. Here's an example of blending terracotta with white earthenware for a very expressive press mold. This was an actual student face. Sometimes working in an accidental way and allowing chance to have an element of expressiveness in your work is a really great thing. Well, that's all for today. I hope this is helpful to you in creating your tiles from your jigs.